Uh-huh. What was that? Oh, Wagner's here. That's good.
Morning.
Wagner is
Good
good.
afternoon. My name is Veronica Williams, and I have the honor of being the president of the Willamette Women Democrats, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the first program of 2022. We are very excited to be welcoming Oregon Senate President Peter Courtney to his first W2D program. Not quite sure why it took us so long, but we're thrilled he's here. And joining him will be State Representative Andrea Salinas. And I'm very glad that all of you could join us. We keep looking forward to being back in person, but COVID-19 keeps coming up with a new variant and saying, oh no, you won't. So we continue to bring you our programs via Zoom, and we'll continue to do that into the future. A few housekeeping matters. As you have joined us, we have muted your speakers and turned off your videos. We do this to improve the overall quality of the transmission of the program and to help ensure that our speakers will not be interrupted by accidental noises at your end. So unless I specifically call on you, please do stay muted and with your videos off. Please feel free to put any questions for our speakers in the chat. After their remarks, we will be introducing elected officials and candidates and other special guests in the Zoom room, and then we will get to your questions. If you have not yet had a chance to renew your membership or join for the first time, it is not too late. Membership and PAC information can be found online at w2dems.com. Your membership makes these Zoom programs possible, and I thank everyone who has already renewed or has joined for the first time. In addition, your contributions to our PAC make it possible for W2D to support state and local candidates in the important races coming up in May and November. Speaking of elections, welcome to 2022. Frankly, there is so much happening this year, even those of us who play in the sandbox can't quite keep up. But here are the highlights. For the first time in a while, we have a hotly contested Democratic primary for governor, likely to be followed by an intense governor's race between two political parties with dramatically different visions for our state. Our congressional districts have been redrawn, impacting all of us in the metro area. In addition to the new 6th district, the 5th has been significantly redrawn, and we have a contested primary for the Democratic nominee there. Longtime Congressman Peter DeFazio has announced his retirement, and the 4th district seat is now open. Labor Commissioner Val Hoyle has announced a run for that seat, leaving open the race for State Labor Commissioner, which is a very important May race. So catch your breath. We then have the redistricted Oregon House and Senate with lots of open seats and important county races in Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington coming up. So we'll talk about a lot more of that next month. Stay tuned. Even without COVID, 2022 is going to be a wild ride. Meanwhile, in February, our state legislature begins what is referred to as the short session. Originally designed to basically deal with budget adjustments and to, quote, clean up, end quote, minor issues from the prior year's session. In past years, this even year session has taken on some tough topics. So today, a preview of what's up in the Oregon House and Senate this February. I'm very pleased to introduce board member and program committee member Claudia Black, who will introduce our guest speakers. Claudia.
Thank you, Veronica. It is my great pleasure today to welcome Senate President Peter Michael Coleman Courtney. Senator Courtney is a true public servant. He's served in the Oregon legislature for 38 years and
Stop.
What? Did you say stop?
Go ahead, you're fine, Claudia.
I'm sorry.
20 of those years as Senate President. Peter loves the Capitol and the legislative process. A fellow legislator recently said, and I quote, "His service of nearly 2 decades as Senate President shows his ability to persevere and bring people together. He is tough as nails with a compassionate heart. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to serve with him." And in these divisive times, you might think these words of praise came from a fellow Democrat, but in fact, they were spoken by the current Republican leader in the Senate. During his long career in the House and Senate, Senator Courtney has championed many causes. He led the charge to increase funding for community mental health services. He was also the major force behind replacing the Oregon State Hospital facility, which was built in 1883, with a new 620-bed facility, which was completed in 2011. Peter not only solves problems, but he anticipates them. For example, he worked to create a program to make schools and emergency services facilities safer in preparation for the expected Cascadia subduction zone earthquake. He's also been the champion of work currently underway to make the state capitol buildings seismically safer. Senator Courtney was the driving force to initiate the annual legislative sessions, which Veronica just mentioned, to better meet the needs of a growing population, and Oregonians overwhelmingly approved this change in 2010. And unsurprisingly, it's not just human beings that have benefited from his legislative efforts. In 2011, the Oregon Humane Society named him top dog for his support and advocacy for animal-related measures.
Hit or bumped or something.
And although he was the elected official, I believe his...
When I first saw her, she didn't look at all like the same lady.
Can you guys please take mute? Although Peter was elected official, I believe his beloved Deli the Dachshund had a dachshund had a lot to do with that honorarium. Senator Courtney earned his bachelor's degree in political science and a master's in public administration from the University of Rhode Island. He went on to earn a law degree from Boston University School of Law. Fortunately for us, he came west to clerk for a judge in the Oregon Court of Appeals. He remained in Salem and served 6 years on the Salem City Council before winning a seat in the Oregon legislature. While on the council, Peter met and married his wife, Margie, which has been one of his best decisions. They have 3 married sons and 5 grandchildren. During his long and distinguished career in politics, Senator Courtney has remained a true statesman, bridging the divide between the parties and striving to accomplish the work of the people. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention Peter's love of baked goods. Flour, sugar, and butter are a winning combination for him. And as anyone who has worked in the Capitol for very long knows, never bring Peter 1 cookie. It's always 2. We are so pleased he accepted our invitation to speak with us today about the short session. I know that you would like to join me in giving a hearty welcome to Senator Peter Courtney, but you're on mute, so I'll clap. And now I'm pleased to introduce Representative Andrea Salinas. For all of Representative Salinas's work life, she has been on the front lines of politics, working for members of Congress, including Senators Dianne Feinstein and Harry Reid, Congressman Peter Stark, and finally, Congressman Darlene Hooley right here in Oregon. After seeing what's possible to accomplish in the political arena, Andrea decided to advocate in Salem for issues important to her, increasing the minimum wage, addressing climate change, and providing comprehensive reproductive health care coverage to all Oregonians. Andrea was appointed to the legislature in 2017 and won her first election in 2018. She quickly assumed leadership roles, serving as vice chair of the House Committee on Healthcare and as House Majority Whip. Presently, she's fighting for more accessible, affordable, quality healthcare. She serves as chair of the work group tasked with crafting reproductive healthcare policy that covers all Oregonians. In keeping with her advocacy for family health, she fought to pass the nation's most progressive paid family leave bill. She introduced and passed a bill that made Big Pharma accountable to consumers and led to lower prescription drug prices. Andrea's father was an immigrant who began life as a farm worker and ultimately obtained a well-paying union job that allowed her family to move into the middle class. Following his example of hard work and perseverance helped Andrea juggle jobs and studies over 7 years to graduate from the University of California, Berkeley with a degree in psychology. Representative Salinas's district includes Lake Oswego, where she lives with her husband and daughter. Andrea has recently announced her candidacy for the new Congressional District 6. We're happy to have her joining us today to discuss the House's priorities for the next session. First, we'll hear from Senate President Courtney, who will fill us in on what to expect in the short session, and I hope he will share some of the changes he's seen throughout his long and productive career. Peter, you're on. Thank
Well,
you.
I don't know about this baked good stuff.
It's true. I remember.
Talking about my dog. It's quite an introduction. Went on a couple of days. I was called by Claudia from Switzerland, and she said, you're going to be in person and they want you to come because nobody else is willing to come. And she proceeded to tell me all the speakers you've had that are federales and statewide, and all the legislators are from the Tri-County area. I don't live in the Tri-County area. I live in Salem, which is down the road a piece. So I said, I don't know why they want to talk to me. She says, well, sure they do, but we are having troubles getting a speaker. We wanted Salinas and we wanted Taylor, but there was a lawsuit, so they couldn't have them. But I see Salinas is back tonight. So I want to apologize for being here because really this is Salinas's show, not mine. Also, I got to tell you, I have your resume, the Vita here, shows me when I'm supposed to speak. I have a first name because Claudia, whoever put this together, says Courtney. My first name is Peter. I love the name Peter. My second name is Michael, and the middle name is Coleman Courtney. I actually like middle names better than anything else. So I'm glad that, of course, Andrea Salinas, they got all her names here, but they got me just Peter, but they just Courtney. So I do have those names, Peter, Michael, Coleman, Courtney. And if you want to know what each one of them stands for, you can ask me and I will answer any questions, if we get to any, that you want to ask me, personal, private, intimate, whatever you want to ask me, I will answer. To be frank with you, I don't know what we're going to do in February, because at this stage of the game, we got nightmare situations on our hand. We have more money than we know what to do with, $1.7 billion. We right now have 250 requests from legislators, what they want. We have 280 bills in. Now, let me tell you about that. The February session is a 24-hour session, because the first week, if the chair of the committee does not schedule a bill for work session by Friday the first week, the bill is dead. And then in the middle of the next week, if we don't get it out of the committee, the bills are dead. So we got all these bills. We can't pass any of them. It's a 35-day session, and it's a nightmare. So this session can be very contentious because every legislator gets to introduce 2 bills against my best judgment. I didn't want to do that. Every legislator should not get any more than 1, but we give them 2, and each 2 bills, each legislator thinks they're going to get 2 bills. They're not. They're not even going to get close to it, because we can't do it. So that's the first thing you need to know. Also, this is a new building. If you haven't been in the Capitol, you should come, because you're not going to know how to get into the Capitol right now. You're not. All the exits you're familiar with are either closed or in a few hours. That is, I think it's January 18th, staff. My staff is watching this. January 18th, they're bringing in metal detectors and they're bringing in X-ray machines and they're setting them up. And they're going to start on January 27th. So I don't care who you are, where you are, including legislators, you got to go through one of those every day. And I'll just tell you this about when I go fly, I set off the machines even when I'm parking the car in the parking lot, and I get wanded and felt all over. So it's going to be quite a situation for me. It's going to take a long time for me to get through these detectors. And it's just one of those things we got to get used to. I'm heartbroken. It's a very sad day in Oregon, very sad day, because this Capitol that I'm in now talking to you from is the most open, accessible Capitol in the nation. That's only got 2 weeks left before it becomes like every other Capitol. And it's tragic. It is sad. It should not be. I mean, this is the people's building, but we're going to this. And so that is all going to change the attitude of this session, everything. I just know it. I just know it. Legislators are not used to this. And they're used to it in other buildings, but not in this building. Plus, the only way you can get in is one of 3 entrances, or 4, but staff can only use 2 or 1, and then the public can only use 2. So that's going to frustrate a lot of members of the public, because you cannot get into this building from State Street at all. at all. It's all shut down. And the front of the Capitol, you're not going to get through the front of the Capitol. That's all shut down. So it is going to be a remarkable situation in terms of, my wife came to the Capitol today. She hadn't been here since this. And it took us an hour to get her in the Capitol. She kept calling us from around. It's not quite true, but she kept calling us saying, I'm here, I'm here. I said, would you go down there and take care of my wife, please? But that just shows you. She spent years in this Capitol, and she's a native Oregonian, and it's a very sad day for her too. What else could I say? Because I do want to I looked at my time. They told me they only give me 2 minutes to talk, and then they've given 15 minutes to Representative Salinas. So I will, I'm going to stop here in a minute. And as I said, I'll take, for those that are listening, I noticed a lot are on their cell phones and things, and that's okay. I'm used to that. I'll take any question you may have of me, private, personal. I'm like that. I'm open. I'll talk. Yeah, private, personal, political. So I think that I'm going to stop there now, because this was to be in person. It really was. Claudia asked me to do it in person. She said, I'm not going to be there, which is interesting, but she is here.
I came back just for this.
Yeah, well, that's not true at all. I don't believe that. That's a false statement that she's just sucking up for some reason. And she, but the fact is, I've never been before the Willamette Women and Democrats. That probably says something about me. My staff's here listening because they're very worried about I'm going to say something. I've always wanted to come before the Willamette Women's Democrats. I would have liked to have been in person, because then I could read your body language. Right now, I got looking you at it coming in a box. Some are on phones. Some haven't smiled since we started. That I think they're unhappy with me being here. Some are drinking coffee or whatever. All of them are hungry. And so this is not the way to give a speech and a bidding speech to a group. But Representative Salinas will be remarkable. She'll tell you all about herself. She'll tell you how she redistricted all the congressional redistricts. She can redistrict all the House and Senate districts, and they filed suit on all of them. And she won it. Oh, she won the courts. They said she was great and she was perfect. So with that, that's a better introduction than she's ever gotten or going to get. And it took a very little time. And about the cookies, I got to tell you, when I give speeches at noon, they often have cookies, part of the lunch. That's all I want is cookies. And I start my speech, I want cookies, and I can tell you the cookies I want. And I don't have anything, I don't get anything. I don't get cookies here. I don't get cinnamon rolls. I don't get anything. So thank you very much for allowing me to come before you. I do think Q&As are more interested than speeches. So with that, Representative Salinas, do I give it over to her right now? Do I say, okay, Representative Salinas, take it? Is that what we do? Well, that's what
got it. Perfect.
That's what I'm going to do anyway. Representative Salinas, I'm not the program chair, but you better start talking now.
Thank you, President Courtney. So everyone knows the headliner. We would not have 83 people here today if it wasn't for President Courtney. He was the headliner. I was the House's backup last minute fill-in. So I'm very honored to be sharing this stage with a legend, really. I mean, President Courtney has provided Oregon with so much incredible leadership. He didn't say this. It was his 5th time doing redistricting. Very masterful at this. So thank you. The state owes you a lot.
She's just trying to get me to endorse it for Congress. That's what this thing is all about here, folks. So just understand me. I know what's going on here, but proceed, Your Honor.
Thank you. So I was asked to share what I thought might be the House priorities going into this session. And I think it would help to set a little context. And the good Senate President usually does this. Folks know last session was like any other in Oregon history. We faced enormous challenges in response to unprecedented crises. And I'm really proud of the way Oregon's 81st Legislative Assembly responded to all the adversity. As a legislative body, we prioritize pandemic relief, wildfire recovery, the housing crisis, improving our behavioral health system, and pushing for more equitable policing and a fair criminal justice system. I'm really proud of the progress we made, and I think we're all committed to building on these successes as we continue to move forward. Obviously, the COVID pandemic has just proved to be another challenging year. It's global. We have all these different variants, mutations. We've vaccinated over 66% of our state against COVID. It's not enough. Yeah, we've fought wildfires. We've tried to work on the massive backlog of unemployment claims. I know my office personally, and I'm sure every office of legislators who are here have helped many constituents receive their benefits. And I believe that Oregonians are strong and resilient. The short session, we helped to keep Oregonians housed while many had no access to income. We made historical investments, again, in our behavioral health system. And this last time around, we again prevented folks from being evicted from housing, provided support for Afghan refugees, delivered drought relief to farmers and irrigators across the state, and invested in gun violence prevention. So heading into the short 2022 session, we have some unfinished business on the table from last session, and we really need to remain vigilant in addressing the public health crisis before us. And typically, as many of you know in this room, the short session is really meant for unfinished business. And as the Senate President mentioned, balancing our budget. And we have, this big surplus right now. So in terms of just a few of the priorities for the House, including what I would consider some unfinished business, we have things like, and I'll go over them, but just to mention the few that I'll go over is agricultural worker overtime. And this was a bill that I led last session, and I've been working in a work group fashion with Senator Taylor again, who heads up the Business and Labor Committee over on the Senate side, and Representative Paul Holvey, who heads it up on the House side. Access to universal legal representation for some of our undocumented communities. Harvest tax and our private forest accords. I think we're going to have to figure out how to merge that. And then I think we'll be coming back to some type of justice reinvestment bills. So to just touch on agricultural worker overtime, this has been, like I mentioned, something that we've been working on now, it feels like for well over a year, spent many hours prior to the Christmas break trying to figure out how to bring our growers, our different, we have over 200 agricultural commodities here in Oregon, how to bring all the various subsections of industry together with our workers and try to figure out how we remove, because under the Fair Labor Standards Act, agricultural workers are exempt from overtime pay. And this historically was rooted in really trying to get Southern legislator Democrats at the federal level on board with overtime pay. But given that agriculture was really rooted in slavery, they wanted to be exempt. And so in order to get the Fair Labor Standards Act passed in 1938, they needed the cooperation of those Southern legislators. So we have been trying, like I said, over the last year. Representative Paul Holvey and, like I said, Senator Taylor and myself have come up with a proposal that would help industry to kind of transition with some wage supports. So we would extend the period of time in which we would move to a 40-hour work week. So we would start off with 55 hours. So work over 55 hours would be compensated at time and a half for an agricultural worker, and then ratchet it down over 5 years. And then the 5th year, we would hit 40 hours. And then along those 2-year tranches, we would provide some wage supports for the growers and for industry. So with that incremental increase in overtime pay, business would get 50% in a tax credit and then ratchet down to about 25%. So that is the proposal that Democrats have on the table right now. We've been collecting feedback and hearing again from industry on how this should work. So I'm really hoping that we can get there to some kind of agreement. We may not be able to. However, at the same time, Commissioner Hoyle does have the authorization to move ahead with overtime and a rulemaking. So she will start that rulemaking here coming up in February, along the same time as we are trying to move a bill. So either way, I think we are going to get to moving agricultural workers to 40 hours. It's just how we do it. So that's one bill that will be coming up here. A second one is, again, one that I worked on, and I think Senator Lieber over on the Senate side, and I think this bill will start on the Senate side, deals with universal legal representation. So when an undocumented person is faced with deportation, sometimes it can happen very suddenly and they have no representation before in their court proceedings. And we know that if you have representation, you're about 500 times more likely to have a successful case. And so this is something that we have been working on with the legal service providers. We've been working with community-based organizations to make sure that we have a system where we can triage those cases that are really imminent. And because we also know that a lot of times that person who is in that deportation proceeding is generally the primary breadwinner, and the whole family structure starts to fall apart when that person is facing deportation. So again, been working with the Senate and the House kind of in tandem and our Ways and Means folks to try to see if we can get this through this next time around. Now, the harvest tax and the private forest accords, I know a lot of folks were really interested in seeing if we could eliminate OFRI. This was another bill I worked on last time that did not get through. But the governor and private timber owners came to an agreement on what should be done. And there was a memorandum of understanding that was done in 2020. And over the past year, negotiations really kicked into high gear and a deal was finally reached between the 13 forest and conservation groups and the 13 timber representatives on new rules for the Oregon Forest Practices Act. So I think it's a great success. I'm really excited about it. But at the same time, we need to now figure out how, because we did not pass the harvest tax last time, we need to figure out how to kind of merge what is now in the new Oregon Forest Practices Act with the harvest tax. So I think that will be something that folks come back with. That is not going to be my bill. And then finally, justice reinvestment. This was something, it was House Bill 2002, which a lot of folks may know it by. There were kind of three buckets of policy. One was stops and searches. So the other one was trying to make sure that we set up for success those who are on probation or post-prison supervision. And then finally, investments in communities and community-based organizations to see through those who are kind of cycling in and out of the criminal justice system. So those are the things that I see as kind of the leftover unfinished business. And there are many others too. And then there are things that I would see that we still need to address because of COVID. So in the healthcare arena, which is, again, I'm serving as vice chair now, we are going to have a ton of Medicaid redeterminations. We added another 300,000 members to our Medicaid rolls during the pandemic, and CMS allowed, the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services allowed us to automatically keep folks on the program through the pandemic. But once the emergency orders are lifted, we're going to need to examine these members' eligibility to remain in for these. So we'll need to figure out what they need in order to get the job done so it's done well. We're also, as people probably know, we are really suffering nurse staffing shortages, and not just in Oregon, across the US. So this Representative Prusak and I know Senator Patterson are trying to figure out what we can do in terms of incentivizing more nurses, making sure that our hospitals and healthcare systems also have available nurses in place. So making arrangements so that we can get licensed nurses from other states more quickly into Oregon. So there we'll be seeing a bill on that. So I suspect that we, like President Courtney said, I'm with him. I actually, having been in leadership now and seeing the amount of bills that we have to get through or people expect, there's an expectation of being able to get a lot done. It's 35 days. We're not going to be able to get it all done. And there's some pressing issues and we have to prioritize. So I will stop there and I'm happy to open it up for questions.
Thank you both very much. Before we get to the questions, so just a reminder, you can drop some questions in the chat. And I know we do have some there. And then I've also received some questions by email prior to the event. So I'll have some questions that I'll be asking too that you may not see in the chat. But before we do that, I do want to take a moment to welcome some of the electeds and candidates who are running, who are with us today. And in some cases, I may not recognize your name or know that you are running. So if I do not mention you, if you just want to go to the reactions and put your hand up, I will look for that and try and acknowledge you as we go along. I would like to begin by welcoming State Senator and Senate Majority Leader Rob Wagner, Senator Kathleen Taylor, Westland Mayor Jules Walters, Tualatin City Councilor Bridget Brooks, and Tualatin City Councilor Valerie Pratt, Terry Prigg Rigsby, who is the West Multnomah Soil and Conservation District and also a candidate for a Metro seat, Ben Bowman, who is the school board chair in Tiger Tualatin School District and a candidate for House District 35 for the state rep. Catherine Harrington, who is with us today, who's the chair of the Washington County Commission. Former state representative Margaret Doherty is with us. And Betty Reynolds, the past president of the Oregon School Board Association and former member of the Clackamas County Community College Board. And I think I got everybody, but if I missed you, oh, okay, Catherine McMullen, would you like to unmute yourself and tell us?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Catherine McMullen, and I'm running for Clackamas County Clerk. I'm a longtime Oregon elections administrator.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I don't have time to have people talk this meeting,
That's
but
okay.
Thank you very much for joining us. Is there anyone else that I missed? All right, thank you very much. On to, oh, Kevin, I'm sorry. Would you like to unmute?
I was just waiting for question and answers. Are we
Oh,
at that
okay,
yet?
if you're going to ask a question, please put it in the chat. Okay,
Okay,
and
very good.
because it's easier if I can just go through the questions. So I'd like to start with some that I received ahead of time. One of the questions that I'd like you both to address is, how can we improve implementation of policies passed by the legislature through government agencies? And are we investing enough in government operations? If the policy is good, but the follow through is too slow or poorly done, people lose faith in government's ability to work properly. So would you like to address that issue of investment in government operations? And I think we'll start with you, Senator Courtney, if you don't mind.
The role of the legislature is to pass bills and the budget. It's the role of the executive branch to implement them. This question is asked all the time. It's always an issue. And one of the reasons we went to annual sessions was to help deal with it in some way. But in the end, unless you go to a full annual session to actually hold administrative agency heads to what you want to have or what you think you passed, you have to basically rely on these sessions. And we did create legislative days. It's a concept that was created along with the annual sessions. It's a 3-day period where all the committees meet, and they often ask agency heads to come before them to try to make known how they feel about what they're doing. But in the end, and this has particularly been a problem in certain agencies, if an agency head wants to take matters into his or her hands, there's not a lot the legislature can do about it, because basically one of the big problems with our form of government is many legislators think they are agency heads and they act like it. That is not their job. And so the problem is, the only thing you can do is go review what they're doing, have committee hearings, bring the agency heads before you, and maybe come up with some more legislation. But in the end, an agency head either respects the role of the legislature or they don't. And so it's more of a question for the governor and the executive branch, because they have an obligation to make sure that the policies are implemented given the legislative intent.
Thank you. Andre, did you want to add anything?
No, I mean, President Courtney got it right. I mean, I think what doesn't get seen during the interim is a lot of work that the legislature does. And I know just from my perspective, I've worked with the Alcohol Drug Policy Commission. I've worked with OHA a lot in a lot of, what they implement. And so what you guys don't see, or what the public doesn't see a lot of times, are the letters, are the phone calls being made from legislators. I know Speaker Kotek and I, and when Mitch, late Mitch, Representative Mitch Greenlick was alive, we used to have these follow-up meetings and follow-up questions all the time. But ultimately, we are not the boss of the agency heads. So that's the hard part. But, so to President Courtney's point, today we had, committee days, and I was questioning OHA. What is redeterminations going to look like? We had this in 2017 and we weren't really prepared for it. What were the lessons learned? So when they come before us, we can question them in a public capacity, and we do. And, and I've reached out to some of my Republicans as well, because they have the same concerns. What is this going to look like? We need this to be smoother than it was before. So let's learn from the past and do better in the future, which is also why I feel like short sessions are really hard to bring forward new legislation, because we need to implement what we just did, and we need to do it well. So I'd like to go one step at a time.
Thank you. Another question is, how do we serve our rural communities better so that they don't feel the need to secede from Oregon? Is it a question of services, lack of attention, or attitudes towards them? Andre, do you want to bite that one first?
Well, it's interesting. I went out to Eastern Oregon with Lynn Finley a few years ago with Representative Margaret Doherty at the time. And it was, it was eye-opening, right? Very different going out to the Ore-Ida plant and the onion operations. And, but, we heard from folks who had said, when we had the big snowstorm, and what was it, in 2017, 2018, the governor came out and the speaker came out. That was the first time we'd had a speaker or a governor come out here in a long time. And so I think we just need to continue connecting with each other in a real way. And COVID has made that exponentially harder. Again, I try to reach out to my Republican and rural colleagues throughout the year. It's, but with COVID, when you're, again, trying to address constituents, trying to, address your immediate needs, it's kind of that, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where do you go? But I do think maybe in a more visible way, I don't necessarily know. And we did get some press, Rep. Doherty and I, when we were out there, and Representative Finley got some good press. And there was some good legislation actually that was brought back, I think, from those visits. So I think those are helpful. I'm not sure how we penetrate to kind of the broader community. And I'm sure the Senate president, he's been around longer. He's seen this. I don't know what the real answer is, though.
Thank you.
Well,
Go ahead. Go ahead, President Courtney.
I think my answer is going to frustrate some people on this call and Democrats in general. When I decided, I tried to do things with the Ways and Means Committee to go out throughout the state and conduct public hearings, particularly in Eastern Oregon. When we put together the Student Success Act, the big act where we came up with a new source of funding schools, all the public hearings started in Eastern Oregon. They did. And anything like that, I've asked that made sure that we would go into Eastern Oregon with the committees. But I just have to tell you, and I've said this before, and it's sad, when I first was elected in the Oregon legislature, there were Democrats representing Pendleton, Ontario, Baker City, Klamath Falls. And there were Republicans representing Washington County, one of whom is the famous Nancy Riles, who I worshiped. And those days are over. They're all over. And, when you are in a caucus, we live in caucuses, and you have a person there that speaks very strongly, differently than most of the caucus members, it is a very powerful thing. I think a lot of members want to feel like they care about other parts of the state, but we've become so divided and so entrenched in our camps and the way we're getting representation now that this is going to be a frustrating thing for ad infinitum. I do not know right now how you're going to fix it, because the fact is your population base is basically the greater Portland area down to about Salem. Now you got Eugene, but the fact is that's where it is. And sort of having a member of the speaker or a president from that part of the state, or a governor or a secretary of state, which is not happening, or US senators, not happening, then I don't see this. I see this kind of struggle and this kind of division continuing. I'm very depressed. That's one of the things that makes me very sad about Oregon, my Oregon, because I really wish that what the question was not necessary, but it is. And unfortunately, I don't have any profound answer except to tell you the structures are such that it works against us getting together, even though there are members who work very hard to work across aisle, very, very hard. The fact is, it's not easy in this day and age, and the representation, the way the representation exists, makes it also more difficult.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have property in Eastern Oregon, and I remember when I first started receiving the newspapers from Eastern Oregon, I found it quite fascinating that all the topics in the papers there were exactly the same as the topics in the papers in Western Oregon. Everybody was concerned about the same issues, but everybody seemed to think that life was completely different once you cross the Cascades. And I think we have a lot more in common than divides us, but we don't always realize it.
I do think Eastern Oregon people are more respectful. When I go to Eastern Oregon, they treat me much better than in this side of the valley. They appreciate the fact you're coming there. They have a much different attitude in terms of elected officials, in my opinion. I'll just say that straight up. And I've always found that to be true. And I've always been delighted to go to Eastern Oregon. And there's Central Oregon, but I'm talking Eastern Oregon. There's a huge difference. So I just add that for what it's worth.
There's some questions in here about rental assistance and housing and the current Oregon Emergency Rent Assistance Program. Do either of you want to speak to it? I know that was a bit of a topic in the special session, and I don't know if there's more that you're going to be addressing in February on this matter. Andrea, do you want to start?
Sure. So yeah, I think this is probably a question for the presiding officer or whoever our next speaker is. But I would say what I've heard in terms of kind of housing is breaking down barriers to construction is going to be, I think, one of the things that, at least our housing committee on the House side is going to be looking at. So addressing bottlenecks and kind of local permitting processes for building new homes, manufactured housing parks and recovery. I know Representative Marsh is working on a bill that will allow greater use of prefabricated modular homes in existing manufactured housing parks. So things of that nature. I am unclear about, kind of building on what we did in the short or the special session, but the presiding officer probably has more insight.
No, this is just a monster. This thing, I don't know if we got in control of it yet. We've done more money on rental assistance. The landlords have been hurt pretty bad by it. And we keep hearing this is the last thing we need to deal with, that we've taken care of it now. And it comes back that now they need more money, et cetera, et cetera. And the whole housing thing completely confuses me, because that's where we rely on the agencies, to be very frank with you. And I shouldn't say this, but that's been a problem. And with an agency situation, getting the money out, et cetera. And I don't know why, whether it's because I just don't know. But there's an example where we've struggled with an administrative agency. First and foremost, we have spent tons of time on this issue during the pandemic, tons of time. Tried and tried and tried to get it right. Not just one special session, 7 special sessions. And I hope that the last time we dealt with it, which was the last special, I hope we won't have to deal with it for the foreseeable future. As far as housing, I don't know. The governor said, Salem's done well with housing, but Portland hasn't. So I don't know what to say about that. I'm not from Portland, and I don't want to beat up on Portland. But housing is a very mysterious. What are you talking about? Housing for the homeless. You're talking about, I had a bill today they want to introduce to give seniors special money if they have someone who wants to do away with their apartment complex and allow people with more money to rent. They want to create some money for the seniors so they don't have to leave. I mean, it's one program after another. I, for the life of me, don't know when we're going to really be able to oversee housing in the state of Oregon. And it goes on and on and on. And I'm very frustrated by that.
Ms. Rose, I see a raised hand. Can you put a note in the chat, please? It's a little bit easier than calling on people. If you can do that, it would be great. If not, I'll come back to you. Let's see what else I had. Okay, there's a question in here about the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is a federal program. And the statement is made that apparently Oregon families leave 137 million on the table every year, and that we have the second lowest uptake of the Earned Income Tax Credit in the country. And so the question is, apparently there's a group that's advocating for state funds, of course, to help nonprofits throughout the state build capacity to assist working families gain access. So I think this presentation was given to the legislature yesterday, and I don't know if either of you are familiar with that particular request or how we, it's really an issue of how we communicate with constituents across the state about what programs they are entitled to and how to obtain them. So that's, you know, it's a little bit broader question in that way too. Andrea?
Yeah, I know this on the House side, this has been an issue that our chair of our revenue committee, Nancy Nathanson, has been really interested in. And this is a perennial, like ongoing issue. I remember when I worked for a member of Congress for the Ways and Means Committee and did tax and trade policy. And this was, you know, the EITC was back then, like in the, you know, late 90s, early 2000s, you know, post kind of Bill Clinton building on the EITC. So this has been an ongoing issue. So I'm not sure, and I can take a look at the link. It looks like Maureen sent it. I'll take a look at it. But I was just about to say, Senator Taylor has always been, I think, she's been on the revenue committee. She may be able to provide us some information if she wants to pop in with an answer, of course, I will let the presiding officer go first.
Well, no.
She actually just, so Senator Taylor just said it was a great question and she was having to leave to go to another meeting, but she welcomed someone contacting her directly. So she's Senate District 21, and you can go online to the Senate and send an email through the Senate website.
Yeah, so bottom line is that we've made great strides in improving that, and we did, change the rate. We just need to change the rate more, and anyone who is welcome, everyone is welcome to come to Salem and advocate for that change, because it's absolutely needed, because there's more work to be done. That's all I have to say. Thank you, and I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, wait a minute. I gotta say something. Everything I said about Representative Salinas on redistricting, I meant it for Senator Taylor, because I chose Senator Taylor to do redistricting on my side. She didn't want to do it. Nobody who has any smarts wants to do it. But I knew if we were going to get it done, I needed her. And she didn't want to do it, but she did it. And I got to tell you, they want to create a commission to redistrict. It's not working in the states that have the commission. No, it's not. And other states couldn't get it done. And the state of Oregon, nobody got any credit for this, did an impossible thing. It redistricted fairly and accurately all members of the whole legislative districts, which is 90, all the members of Congress in terms of including the 6th district. So it was Taylor and Company, but she is the one. If you need an architect, if you need to know someone who deserves high praise, this organization should say so, have her back and let her talk at length, because she will talk at length, none of which I'll understand, as to how she did it and the remarkable job she did do. You can leave now, Kathleen, but if I hadn't said that, I'd hear from you for the rest of my life.
Absolutely not true. And the reality is that I think that both Representative Salinas, I'm going to go ahead go out on the ledge here and say that we both know that it wouldn't have happened without you, President Courtney. Do we agree with that? Do you agree with that? Yes. You made certain that it stayed in the legislature as it should. So thank you. And I really want to apologize. Representative Salinas and I were supposed to come when we were in the height of redistricting and talk. And one of the reasons I wanted to come on tonight, if you don't mind, is for me to give my sincere apology for not being able to come to that meeting, and we had to cancel at the last minute, which I still feel bad about. And I do have to go work on essential worker pay. So, and thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Representative Salinas, and everyone here tonight. So good night. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Senator. Let's see. Okay, let me see what else I have in here. Okay, I think that's somewhat been covered. One question that came up that I think is a little interesting. It's my view, may be not exactly correct, but since almost the first quote unquote short session, there have always been other things that came into play or people wanted to raise, or as Senator Courtney pointed out, there's so many bills that you couldn't possibly deal with them all that people want to propose. Is there any discussion about having a longer session during the even number year?
Well, yeah, I haven't heard much discussion, but it's going to happen. It'll have to happen. One day Oregon will probably have a full-time legislature. Now, it may be way down the road. But the issue of the short session is a tremendous disagreement over it. The state of Washington basically just does financial issues in their short session. We also allowed policies, and there's a lot of fights that are going on now, particularly with the Republicans, that we weren't supposed to do that, and that et cetera, et cetera. And so all I can say is I'm convinced, not in my lifetime, you're going to have a longer session simply because you're going to need to have a longer session. 35 days is a short session, to say the least, because all the internal deadlines you have to meet. So it'll happen, but I just don't know when it'll have to go longer. Because I don't want the other session to go beyond June. Because when I first served in the legislature, we almost went through Labor Day. It was terrible. You don't want legislators in the Capitol during the summer months. Oregonians don't do well inside in summer months, and it was very bad. So I like that structure, but I do think the even number of years session is going to have to be longer. And you're also going to need to pay legislators more, because what's going to happen is people who also need to have employment to support their families and things, you can't make that kind of money now as a legislator. It's pathetic. And while we're increasing salaries for staff, we're getting better there. We have not had a major increase for state legislators in a long, long time. And that's going to have to come to an end. Because the longer you go in session, the more difficult you make it on people to have jobs. And you also make it more difficult from a family standpoint, because you talk about Eastern Oregon, many of them, they don't have the money to move their families here during these sessions. So there's a big issue coming to Oregon as it gets bigger. And I was just 1.8 million people were here when I came here in July 9th, 1969. Now it's 4 something. So yes, the session will be longer. You're going to have to pay legislators more, and the pressures of the time will dictate it.
Thank you. I think that's important. We're getting some questions regarding funds that have been allocated for caseworkers who work with the homeless. And I don't know how much, some of that comes from the state. I know some of that comes from the county. Some of that comes from the city specifically, but there's a concern about folks not getting follow-up with case managers or not enough staffing. Are we back to the executive side of the house on this issue, or is this something that the legislature needs to be looking at in terms of how the agencies that work with our houseless population are funded and what results we're expecting from that funding?
Well, DHS has got a huge caseload. If this question relates to that, where they're saying they need 200 more employees. I'm looking at my staff. There's a huge thing going on, a huge problem at DHS. And I don't know whether that relates to your question or not. So we are seeing a shortage of workers really affecting our abilities to do some of the things we want to do. And it is with these state agencies. So, can we do it? Yeah. Can we create the budget? I think it will be a big issue in February about these kinds of state agency budgets in terms of giving them much more money so that they can do some of the work that you're talking about.
So we're getting several questions and kind of back to our original topic. So I guess I'll say for each of you, what are the top 3-5 things that you would really like to see your branch accomplish in the next, in this short session? So what would you like to see the Senate accomplish Senator Courtney, what's the top of your list, knowing that there's many,
Well,
many topics, but
yeah,
you
it's-
personally will feel good.
It's dramatically changed in the last several hours because of a conversation I had with someone. You know, the only thing wrong with kids are adults. And I've reached the point that this idea that school districts, the kids have got to get back into school right now, right now. And I'm convinced that if we would get together, and we did it with a summer program, Tina and I created a summer program last year, I don't know how many millions, and over 100,000 kids participated in summer learning. It had a tremendous impact. And right now, this has got to stop. And legislators have got to get together as leaders. I don't want to talk Democrat and do, we've got to get the children back at school. That has to be a priority. You know, adults talk about things affecting adults, and that's fine. But this is devastating some kids. More than one parent said they almost lost their child, or they think they have. And it isn't just those people that don't have a lot of money. This is universal. And this is probably the most disruptive thing that's happened with the pandemic. More than the forest fires, more than unemployment, more than short of what it is that we have backburnered this issue. We have not emphasized it anywhere near like we should have. So I'm going to tell you right now, I'm just going to start saying, we have got to do something in the next 15. I don't know what it takes and how many kids. I don't care about it's teachers, whether volunteers, I don't care. We have got to figure out a way to keep the schools open. I don't like the school districts deciding this issue. And I'm very serious about this. We're going to have a generation of kids that didn't go to school, and the impact on them individually is going to be devastating. So we shouldn't be talking about anything now. Housing and all this, we should be talking about one thing, and that is the kids are going to stay in school. And I don't care how many hundreds of millions of dollars it takes, how many kids or whatever, how many kind of we allow people to teach you don't blah, blah, blah. I don't care. Bring in the National Guard. I don't know, but that should be the only issue right now that's driving the legislators and the top people in your state government and the federal government. The kids are going to stay in school. Done, finished. That's it.
Andre, I hate to ask you to follow.
No, I would say I agree with Senator Courtney in terms of kids. I mean, kids need an in-person education. Even with my daughter, LO School District has some of the, arguably some of the best schools in our state. And yeah, kids in her high school struggled last time around, including my daughter, and with the way it was structured online. Still loves it, still loves being in person. But I think that also dovetails on some of our hospital and healthcare needs right now too. I mean, I really do think the nurse staffing and the provider shortages are worrisome. And so we don't know how long this pandemic is going to go on. And this again kind of dovetails with keeping kids in school, right? We like President Courtney was just saying, we don't have enough tests right now. We don't have enough beds right now. We still need to figure all this out. And this really should be first and foremost as we're thinking about this short session.
Well, I'm going to thank you both very much for your time, for the conversation. There is clearly a lot going on, and I know I couldn't get to all questions, but I appreciate people putting there, and I know Senator Courtney and Representative Salinas could take a look at some of those questions as they were popping up. So I certainly hope that they will do that before they tune out today. But I want to thank them both. A few announcements for the audience. We do look forward to seeing you in February when our program will feature a topic of urgency, and this really relates to this last question, mental health services for our youth. We will have State Representative Lisa Reynolds, who's a pediatrician, and Heather Jeffries, who's the Executive Director of the Oregon Council for Behavioral Health, with us to give us the state of challenges and how they hope to meet them. So please watch for our program announcement coming out later this month with the details. I want to thank everyone for joining us. Be sure you are fully vaccinated, boosted, Follow health and safety guidelines and do your best to stay well. We look forward to seeing all of you in February, and thank you very much for joining us today and for your questions. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you.